Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to our weekly Thursday morning Parsha Shiur. This week is Parshas Vayeshev, and today, of course, is Erev Chanukah. We will study an insight from the Parsha of the week, and hopefully, with Hashem's help, we'll try to connect it to the incredible and special Yom Tov of Chanukah, which we begin celebrating tonight. From here, from Parshas Vayeshev, all the way through till the end of Chumash Bereishis, of course, the Torah focuses primarily on Yosef HaTzadik, his experiences, the really incredible story of his lifetime, how he goes from being in a dungeon to becoming the viceroy of Egypt and the most powerful person in the world. Through that, of course, the entire family of Yaakov Avinu, our ancestors, the original Jewish people, go down to Mitzrayim, and from there begins the whole experience of Golus Mitzrayim and Geulas Mitzrayim, etc. So Golus and Geulas Mitzrayim is spoken about really in Chumash Shmos. But from here, four Parshias, Vayeshev, Miketz, Vayigash, and Vayechi, is really all about Yosef himself. And it starts in this week's Parsha, Parshas Vayeshev. To begin today's Dvar Torah, I want to share with you a passage in Gemara, as usual. And as usual, you know me, this is going to be the most astounding, hair-raising, enigmatic, and difficult to understand, perplexing passage in Gemara you've ever studied in your life. Hold on to your heads. Tana Rabbanon, the rabbis taught, says the Gemara, Masechta Sotah daf lamed hey amud beis. Oni v'oshir v'Rasha boyin ledin. A poor man, a wealthy man, and an evil man, a wicked man, stand before the heavenly tribunal after 120 years. L'ani, to the poor man, to the impoverished person, oimrim, they say to him, Mipnei ma lo yasakta b'Torah. Why did you not make it your business, asakta? Why did you not toil in Torah? Why did you not study? Im oimer, if the man says, what do you mean? Ani hayisi, I was poor. I was impoverished. The Torah bimzoinoisai, I spent my whole life by the sweat of my brow, eating bread, supporting myself and my family, keeping the dragon away from the door, battling for survival. You wanted me to study Torah? Says the Gemara, the heavenly tribunal refuses to accept poverty as an excuse for not studying Torah. They tell him, were you more poor? Were you less fortunate, more impoverished than the famous Hillel the Elder? Hillel the Elder made 1 coin a day. Half of it he used for his parnasa, the other half he used as a token of admission into the Beis Midrash. One day, when even that much he didn't have, he went to the roof and he sat and he heard Divrei Elokim Chaim, the words of Torah from Shema and Avtalion through the skylight. But it snowed upon him, and the next day was Shabbos, and they came into the Beis Midrash, and they found Hillel sitting there with his face pressed against the skylight, a whole couple of feet of snow on top of him. He had already passed out. He was no longer conscious. They brought him in. They were Machal Shabbos just to save his life. The heavenly tribunal will tell this man who claims he couldn't study Torah because he was poor, don't you tell me that you were poor and you couldn't study Torah. If Hillel could study despite his poverty, surely you're no more poor than Hillel was. If he can do it, so can you. Poverty is no longer an excuse. Out. All right? Oshir, if a person if a wealthy person comes upstairs, and again the same question, why didn't you study Torah? Why didn't you make it your business? If he says, what do you mean? I'm so wealthy. I was so wealthy. But Torah da'isi b'nechosa, you think business affairs handle themselves? I had to take care of all of this myself. I didn't have time to study Torah. I was too busy preserving my assets, my businesses. If I had mishandled them, all the money would go to waste, and how would I be able to give tzedakah? They tell him the heavenly Beis Din will tell him, wealth is no excuse. There was an individual, I don't want to get into the details, called Rabbi ben Charsum. The Gemara says he was so wealthy, he owned 60 cities, and he owned 60 ships, and he owned 60 islands, and he had a ridiculous amount of money. And he was so wealthy that even his own employees didn't recognize him. In fact, he wanted nothing to do with his wealth. He wanted his managers to take care of everything, and all he wanted to do was sit and study Torah. So if he can study Torah, so can you. Wealth is no excuse. Don't tell me I was too rich to study Torah. After Rabbi Elazar ben Charsum, who was so incredibly wealthy, was not interested in any of his wealth, and all he wanted to do was sit and study Torah, wealth is no excuse. Okay. And then the Gemara drops the following bomb. Rasha. A Rasha shows up in the you see? There's space for everybody. A Rasha shows up at the heavenly Beis Din. He comes upstairs. After all, Rishonim don't live forever. They got to face their day of reckoning too. Oimrim loy, so the heavenly Beis Din says to him, Mipnei ma lo yasakta b'Torah. Why did you not study Torah? Im oimer, if the Rasha says, what do you mean, me? Noah hoyisi. I was beautiful. I was handsome. V'torud beyitzri hoyo, and I was distracted. I was busy with my own yetzer hara. You want me to study Torah? I had no time to study Torah. God made me gorgeous. Auf alle Yidden gesagt. And I was so beautiful that I was too busy with my yetzer hara. I didn't have time. I didn't have headspace. The temptations of the yetzer hara were too powerful for me. After all, I'm so incredibly good looking. That's why I didn't study Torah. Oimrim loy, says the Gemara, the heavenly Beis Din will say to him, we refuse to accept your beauty and your yetzer hara temptations as an excuse for you not studying Torah. Why? Klum noah hayisa mi Yosef. Were you more beautiful than Yosef? It says, and then the heavenly tribunal, the Beis Din Shalmaila, gives this man a Rasha who claims he couldn't study Torah because he was too busy. They give him a Parsha Shiur. You see? He also gets a Parsha Shiur. And they tell him the story of Yosef HaTzadik. Specifically the story where Yosef HaTzadik finds himself already in Mitzrayim. He's working for a man called Potiphar, and Potiphar's wife wants to commit a sin with him, and so she attempts to seduce him and to cultivate a relationship with him in which she would be able to be intimate with him. Says the Gemara, B'chol yom v'yom, every single day, Potiphar, the wife of Potiphar, Yosef's slave owner, Mishadaltei b'dvarim, would attempt to get him to sin through words. Begadim shalav shaloi shachris le'lov shaloi arvis. She would change her outfit twice a day. Once in the morning, once in the evening. She was in Macy's at least once a day, buying 2 outfits, one for the morning, one for the evening, so that Yosef would be tempted by the outfits she was wearing. And when none of that worked, Omraloi, she said to him, Hishamali. She said to him in explicit and blunt terms that he should live with her, he should sin with her. Omar Lolav, Yosef said, no, I refuse. She said, if you refuse, I will see to it that you get locked up in prison. Says Yosef, Hashem Matir Asurim. The Rabbi Shalom will release those who are enslaved, who are inmates, who are in prison. She said, if you refuse me, I will squash you. I will break your stature. Yosef responded, Hashem zoikev kefufim. Hashem erects those who are bent. She said, I will blind your eyes if you refuse me. Yosef said, Hashem poikeach ivrim. Hashem makes the blind see. She said, if you agree, I will give you 1,000 loaves of silver. Yosef still refused. The Torah says he wouldn't participate with her. He didn't listen to her. Lishkav etzlo li yosima, not to lie with her and not to be with her. Lishkav etzlo boilam hazeh, li yosima boilam habo. He didn't want to be with her in this world or in the next world. Concludes the Talmud. Nimtza, says the Gemara, comes out. Hillel machayev aniyim. Hillel obligates all the impoverished people. Hillel holds their feet to the fire. They cannot use their poverty as an excuse. Rabbi Elazar ben Charsa machayev esashirim. Rabbi Elazar obligates the wealthy. They cannot use their wealth as an excuse. He holds the wealthy, the feet of the wealthy to the fire. Yosef machayev esarashoyim, and Yosef obligates all the wicked people. He holds their feet to the fire. The simple meaning is they cannot use their beauty as an excuse. After all, everything that Yosef went through, if he survived it, so can you. The heavenly Beis Din tells the Rasha, don't you tell me you were too beautiful to study Torah. Yosef went through all that harassment and he withstood the sin. Surely, so can you. End of passage in the Gemara as we shall study it today. All right. Much needs to be understood about this particular passage in Gemara. We're not going to get into the Hillel part. There's much that needs to be understood over there. How could Hillel endanger his life that way, etc. That's not for now. We're not even getting into the story of Yosef and Charsam and his wealth and how a wealthy person should balance having wealth and studying Torah. Also needs to be understood. We're going to focus on the third part, where the Gemara says, Yosef machayev esarishoim, that a Rasha comes upstairs to heaven and says, I was beautiful, and they tell him, listen, beauty is no excuse. If Yosef can do it, so can you. Today I want to ask 7 questions. With Hashem's help, I'll remember all 7. Number 1, there's something weird about the way the Gemara articulates this whole passage. The Gemara says, 3 people come before the heavens: a poor person, a wealthy person, and a wicked person. This is weird. The poor person is using their poverty as an excuse. We understand that. The wealthy person is using their wealth as an excuse. We understand that. But the wicked person is using their beauty as an excuse, not their wickedness. It seems like the Gemara should say, a poor person, a rich person, and a beautiful person all come before heaven, and all have an excuse for the fact that they don't learn Torah. Why is one being referred to as a Rasha? They're all Rashoim. They're all Rashoim who haven't studied Torah. They're looking for explanations and excuses to explain why they haven't studied Torah. So one uses his poverty, one uses his wealth, and one uses his good looks. And the heavenly Beis Din dismisses all 3. But it isn't like one of them is a Rasha and the other 2 isn't. It isn't like one of them is saying, oh, I'm a Rasha, that's why I didn't study Torah. He's not saying he didn't study Torah because he's a Rasha. He's saying he didn't study Torah because he's beautiful. So it seems like the right way for the Gemara to say this would have been a poor person, a rich person, and a beautiful person. Yet only one out of the 3 is referred to as a Rasha, as an evil person. Why? That's question number 1. Question number 2, the Gemara's conclusion. Hillel obligates the poor, Rabbi Elazar ben Charsam the rich, obligates the rich, and Hillel obligates the Rashoim. Now let's take a breath. Hillel obligates the poor people because he was poor and studied Torah. Rabbi Elazar ben Charsam obligates the rich people because he was rich and studied Torah. The Gemara's conclusion that Yosef obligates the Rashoim makes it sound like the Gemara is saying Yosef was a Rasha, Rahman al-Islam, and he still studied Torah, and so therefore you cannot use the fact that you're a Rasha as an excuse. Again, Hillel machayev aniyim because he was poor. Rabbi Elazar machayev Rashoim because he was rich. Yosef machayev, Hillel machayev aniyim because he was poor. Rabbi Elazar machayev ashirim. Rabbi Elazar obligates the wealthy because he was wealthy. Yosef machayev asarashoim. Yosef obligates the wicked. Why? Because Yosef was a Rasha? Yosef is referred to as the tzaddik. It seems like the Gemara should have said, Yosef obligates the beautiful. And yet the Gemara says, Yosef obligates the Rashoim. Okay. Question number 3. If we do need a source to prove to us that Yosef was beautiful, if we do need a source in the Possuk to tell us somewhere that Yosef was beautiful, we don't need to look very far. The Possuk says very clearly, Vayehi Yosef yifei Torah v'yifei mara, which literally means that Yosef was beautiful. So if a man comes to heaven and wants to use his beauty as an excuse, and the heavenly Beis Din wants to tell him beauty is no excuse because Yosef was beautiful and still overcame temptation, then in order to prove that Yosef was beautiful, we don't have to tell him a story about how the wife of Potiphar was going to Macy's and changing her outfits. It's a Possuk. Vayehi Yosef yifei Torah v'yifei mara. What's wrong with that? And if, question number 4, and if we are looking for indications that the women were after him, again, to combat the argument of the Rasha who apparently says, I was so beautiful and so busy with my evil inclination, I didn't have time to study Torah. Perhaps the Rasha is arguing that he was being harassed by women. So if we want to tell him that Yosef was also harassed by women, and if Yosef can survive it, so can you, What do we want with the wife of Potiphar? The wife of Potiphar was clearly obsessed with him, clearly at least slightly deranged or acting in a way that seems deranged, and she was just one woman. If we want to prove that Yosef was being hounded or obsessed over by many women, actually that's a Possuk as well. Later in Parshas Vayeshev, when Yaakov blesses Yosef, he talks about Yosef's beauty. Bonois tsoado alei Shiur, says Yaakov. The Egyptian women were literally climbing and jumping on top of walls just to get a chance to gaze at Yosef's beauty. No? There you have it. Schwarz auf Weiß. It wasn't just one woman who was obsessed with Yosef. It was all the young women of Mitzrayim. We make no mention of that to the evil person who wants to use his beauty as an excuse for not studying Torah. Instead, we tell him a story about the wife of Potiphar. Next, question 5. There's something strange about the expression of the Gemara. The Gemara says, quote, the wife of Potiphar, every day she would attempt to seduce him verbally, with words. How? Well, she would change her outfit once in the morning and once in the evening, and she told him that she wanted to sin with him, and if he refused, she would threaten him, and if he agreed, she would bribe him. This is weird. The Gemara starts off by saying that she attempted to convince him verbally. Then starts talking about how she would change her garments in the evening and in the morning, and then talks about the threats that she would make and the bribe that she offered. Starts off with words, goes to garments, and then to the things that she said. What's going on over here? If the point of the Gemara is that she harassed him and she was after him, then it should just say that she was driving him crazy. She was on his case. She wouldn't let him go. No. The Gemara starts off by saying that she was after him bidvorim, with words. Then we switch the conversation to her outfits. And then we go to threats and bribes. And no matter what she said, Yosef had a response, a verbal response. So it seems like it wasn't her verbal arguments that was the difficult part. It seemed like it was her relentlessness that was the difficult part. And yet the Gemara sees unique significance in the fact that she was meshadalta, she was attempting to get him to sin bidvarim verbally. Somehow that's connected to the fact that she would change her garments twice a day and make all these sorts of threats and attempts to bribe him. Okay. Question number 6. Let's take a breath here. The heavenly Beis Din will tell this beautiful person, if Yosef could overcome his temptation, if Yosef could overcome the wife of Potiphar, notwithstanding everything that she did, then you, who are surely no more beautiful than Yosef, you should have overcome yours. Whoa. Whoa. Let's take a breath here. Again, the heavenly Beis Din tells this Rasha, this beautiful person who's using his good looks and how occupied he was with taking care of himself as an excuse for studying Torah. We tell him, if Yosef could overcome his temptation, so should you. I think that this argument of the heavenly Beis Din needs to be pondered for a moment. Are we really going to use Yosef as the paradigm, as the icon of the man, of the tzaddik, who was able to overcome temptation? Really? Says the Gemara, Masechta Sotah, Daf, Lamed Vav Amud Beis, the day that Yosef had that fateful experience with the wife of Potiphar, where she grabbed hold of his garment and he ran out. Very famous Gemara. The Gemara said, Vayavay Abaisa, Yosef came that day, and his resistance had broken. He came to show up at work with every intention of doing the sin, at least according to one opinion. Yosef could withstand the temptation, the threats, the harassment, whatever it was. He could stand it no longer, and he broke. And he came with every intention of committing the sin. What happened? The commentaries make a fascinating observation here. The Torah says, when he came to do his work, quote, Ve'ein ish me anshe habayis sham babois. There was nobody from the members of the family there at home. The commentaries say, yes, but what the Torah means is there were no members of the family who were home, besides for the wife of Potiphar. But there were other people there who were not part of the members of the family. Me'anshe Abayis not, but others yes. Who was it? Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov Avinu showed up. But Oisa Shah at that time, the Yoiknoi Shel Aviv, the image, the visage of his father, appeared to him in the window, and Yaakov stopped him from sinning. So if the heavenly Beis Din is going to make the case that every Rasha should control themselves, just like Yosef controls himself, why doesn't every Rasha say, you know something? If my father would have showed up in the window and stopped me, maybe I would have controlled myself too. But instead, nobody showed up for me, and I was left on my own, and therefore I sinned, just like Yosef would have sinned if Yaakov wouldn't have appeared for him. You want to compare me to Yosef? You want to hold me to Yosef's standards? Gesundheit, hold me to Yosef's standards. What would have happened to Yosef if his father wouldn't show up? And then it gets even better. Who was Yosef's father? Yaakov Avinu. So it took Yaakov Avinu to prevent Yosef from sinning. No? Now you want to hold every Rasha to these standards? What if every Rasha says, well, send Yaakov Avinu to my window to stop me when I'm about to sin, and I assure you I won't do it either. Oh no, says the Gemara. Yosef Machayev Rashoim. How? How is Yosef Machayev Rashoim if Yosef was about to sin, if not for his father showing up? And then the Gemara makes this question even stronger, because the Gemara says that Yaakov and Yosef have a conversation. When Yaakov shows up, when the visage of Yaakov shows up to prevent Yosef from sinning, they actually have a conversation. And Yaakov Avinu speaks to Yaakov and he tells him these words. Yosef, he says, my dear son Yosef, in the future the names of your brothers are all going to be written on Avnei Ephod, on the stones worn by the Kohen Gadol on his shoulders, Avnei Ephod. It's going to say the names of all the Shvatim. Va'ata beineihem, and you, Yosef, are among them too. Only if you don't sin. But if you do sin, your name will be erased, and you will no longer be known by your name, but you will be known as Yosef Roye Zoinus, Yosef the companion of harlots. As it says, Roye Zoinus, Ya'abed Hoin. There's some beautiful interpretations in the commentary on the application of this Possuk, not for now. So Yaakov doesn't just appear at the window to prevent Yosef from sinning, but Yaakov explains to him the consequences of his actions. Yaakov tells him, listen to me, my dear son. If you don't sin, your name will appear in the stones of the ephod together with the rest of your brothers. If you do sin, it'll be removed. And you will be referred to as Yosef Roya Zoinus, Yosef, the companion of Zoinus. When Yosef heard that, the Gemara says, the temptation to sin left him. And he runs outside, leaving his garment behind. That's what it took to prevent Yosef from going through with the sin. And yet the Gemara says that Yosef Machayev Rashoim. Yosef holds every Rasha's feet to the fire. Anybody who will come upstairs and say, I couldn't study Torah because I was too beautiful, will tell them, you weren't more beautiful than Yosef. And Yosef didn't sin. But Yosef didn't sin because Yaakov Avinu, his own father, appeared to him. And Yosef didn't sin because Yaakov Avinu told him the consequences. His entire destiny was hanging on a thread here. That's how Yosef controlled him. That's what removed from Yosef even the temptation to sin. What if every Rasha stands before the heavenly Beis Din and says, you know something? If every time I was about to sin, Yaakov himself would appear to me and tell me, if you don't sin, your name will appear on the stones of the Kohen Gadol. And if you don't, you'll be referred to as Yosef, as Roya Zionus, as the companion of Zionus. And then the temptation would leave me, I wouldn't sin either. Give me what Yosef had, and I will also control myself. But if you haven't given me Yosef's resources, how can you hold me to Yosef's standards? Hillel was poor, no doubt about it. That proves that poverty is not an excuse. Rabbi Elazar ben Charson was wealthy. No doubt about it. He studied Torah anyways. That proves that wealth is not an impediment. Yosef was beautiful, no doubt about it. But Yosef's beauty almost got him to sin. If not for Yaakov showing up and highlighting for him the consequences of this action. How can we hold every Rasha responsible? How can we hold every Rasha to the same standards as Yosef HaTzadik? Okay. If you have a Chumash in front of you, turn for a minute to the beginning of this story. Perek Lametes Possuk Zayin. Perek Lametes Possuk Zayin. This is where the story of the wife of Potiphar begins. So at this point again, Yosef has been sold into slavery. He's purchased by a man called Potiphar, who works for Paroi. The Torah says he's incredibly successful, babayis or basada, in the house, in the field. He's ish matzliach. He's incredibly beautiful. Yefei Torah, Yefei Mara. Perek Lametes Possuk Zayin, beginning of the 6th Aliyah. Says the Possuk. Vayehi, and it was achar advorim o'ela, after these occurrences, after these things. Vatiso eshes adona v'seneha al Yosef, the wife of Yosef's master raises her eyes to Yosef. Vatoimer, and she says, shichvo imi, she approaches Yosef for the sin. Okay. Now this expression in the beginning of certain stories of the Torah, Vayehi achar advorim o'ela, this appears many times, right? We have it by the Akedah. We have it in many places. Whenever the Torah says Vayi achar advorim mo'ela, the Midrash has a field day. What do you mean achar advorim mo'ela? After these things, what would we have thought that it was before? Why would we have thought it's before? What's this achar advorim mo'ela? Achar advorim mo'ela, the Midrash tells us, doesn't just mean that this was after occurrences. Achar advorim mo'ela means after certain words were spoken. Certain occurrences, certain conversations took place, right? Very famously by the story of the Akedah. It also begins with Vayi achar advorim mo'ela. Rashi explains that it was because the angels were complaining to Hashem that Avram made a whole big feast at Yitzchak's bris, and he didn't offer any korbanos. Hashem said, what do you mean he didn't offer any korbanos? If I offer, the whole Suda was for Yitzchak, if I asked him to offer Yitzchak as an Akedah, he would agree to it. And that's why Hashem and that's why Hashem gave Avram the test of the Akedah. Or another explanation according to Rashi by the Akedah, Yitzchak and Yishmael were arguing, right? Yishmael says, I had a bris when I was 13. Yitzchak said, a bris? If Hashem asked me to sacrifice myself, I wouldn't hesitate. Hashem gave Avram Avinu this nisoyin of the Akedah, etc. All right, hold on to your heads. Here too, the Midrash does not disappoint. It was after these words, these experiences, says the Midrash, it means after these words. There were certain words, says the Midrash, that were spoken that were directly responsible for this experience of Yosef being harassed by the wife of Potiphar to the point that he ends up in jail. This was a direct result of words that were spoken. Which words? What are these dvorim o'ela? So the Midrash sends us to 3 opinions. So again, if you have a Chumash in front of you, go to the beginning of the Parsha. Actually, right at the beginning. The second Possuk, it says, Eila told us Yaakov. These are the children of Yaakov. Yosef ben Shva'esrei Shana. Yosef is 17 years old. Hayaroya es echad batzoin. He was taking care of the flock with his brothers. V'unaras b'nei Bilha es b'nei Zilpa neshei Aviv. He's taking care of the sons of Bilha and Zilpa. Quote, Vayove Yosef. Vayove Yosef, and Yosef brings es dibosam ro'o el aviem. Actually, the Torah says, Yosef is the one to throw the first punch. Yosef brings evil reports about the brothers to his father Yaakov. Says the Midrash, what did Yosef say? What was the evil report that Yosef brought about his brothers to his father? 3 opinions. Rab Meir, Rab Yehuda, and Rab Shimon. Opinion number 1, Yosef told his father that the brothers were eating Eiver Menachai. Eiver Menachai means they were detaching pieces of meat from living animals and eating it without properly slaughtering the animal. Eiver Menachai, number one. Number two, Mezalzelin hein bivnei hashfachos v'korin lohen avodim. Opinion number two, or thing number two, Yosef was telling Yaakov that the sons of Leah are being disrespectful to the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, and referring to them as avodim, slaves, because their mothers, Bilhah and Zilpah, were actually originally shvachos. They were actually originally maidservants. They were given to Yaakov together with Rachel and Leah, his wives, as maidservants. Later, when Rachel and Leah were having difficulty having children, they gave Bilhah and Zilpah to Yaakov as wives, and they had children. But the sons of Leah were disgracing the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah and saying, your mothers are maidservants and you're slaves. Number two. Number three, Toilin heinei nehem bivnoisa oretz. Yosef came to his father and said that his sons, Yosef's brothers, are giving eyes to the bnoisa oretz, to the daughters of the land, to the Canaanite women, to the shiksas. And they're considering marrying them. And these are the three things that Yosef told Yaakov about the brothers. Number one, they were consuming meat without proper shchita. Number two, they were harassing the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah. Not harassing, they were disrespecting them. Mezalzel, they were treating them cheaply and referring to them as slaves. And number three, that they were giving eyes to the local non-Jewish women, and that there were sparks flying between them. Hold on to your heads. Concludes the Midrash, for these three things that Yosef told his father negative about his brothers, he was punished for all three. And in the way of midah keneged midah. For Yosef saying that his brothers ate Eiver Minachai, what was the punishment? All in this week's Parsha. Vayishchatu seir izim. What's Vayishchatu seir izim? When the brothers sell Yosef into slavery, they decide to tell their father Yaakov that he was torn by a wild animal. They take his ksoinos pasim, his colored shirt that Yaakov had made to show for his great affection for Yosef. They shech the goat, they dip the ksoinos pasim in its blood, and they show it to Yaakov, and they say, here, look. We found this coat, we found this shirt, and Yaakov concludes, or is concerned, that Yosef is dead. Now, for the sake of dipping this shirt in blood, they don't need to shech the goat. They could have just killed it any way. But the Torah says specifically, Vayishchatu, they shechted the goat. This was midah keneged midah for the bad diba, for the bad lashon hara that Yosef had spoken about his brothers. You told their father they ate Eiver Minachai. When they told your father that you were dead and they dipped your shirt in blood, they made sure to shech the goat. That's number one. Number two, you told your father Yosef that your brothers are disgracing the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah and calling them slaves. Now you're going to be sold into slavery. Le'eved nimkar Yosef. And number three, you told your father that your brothers are giving eyes, toilin heinei nehem, they're giving eyes to the local women, to the non-Jewish women, to the Canaanite women. That's why when Yosef was in slavery, quote, Vatiso Eisha Sadoinov, and the wife of his master, the wife of Potiphar, raises her eyes, sets her eyes on Yosef, and starts to go after him. This was a consequence for Yosef telling his father that his brothers had given eyes to the Canaanite women. This is a wild Midrash. Wild. The Midrash says everything Hashem does is midah keneged midah. Didn't stam happen that Yosef was sold into slavery and his brothers told his father he was dead and he ends up in Mitzrayim and the wife of Potiphar starts up with him and he ends up in prison. No, this didn't happen in a vacuum. Or in even stronger words, the Midrash is saying, don't look at Yosef and go, Oy Gabal, poor Yosef Nebach. His brothers want to kill him, they sell him into slavery, his father thinks he's dead. He ends up in Mitzrayim as a slave. The wife of Potiphar starts up with him, he ends up in prison. Oy Gavalt, poor Yosef. No, poor Yosef, says the Midrash. Hab nish kein Rachmanis. Yosef is being held responsible by the Rabbanu Shalom, Mida Keneged Mida, of everything he did. And it all starts with the first thing the Torah tells us about the whole story. Yosef slandered his brothers to his father. And Mishtam, Yosef said, Avram and Achai. Yosef said they're calling the brothers slaves. And Yosef said they're giving eyes to women. So the same three things happened to him. Yosef is sold into slavery. Yosef is told, they tell his father that he's dead. They dip his coat into blood of a goat that they shecht. And Yosef falls into the crosshairs of the wife of Potiphar, who tells him, who wants to commit a sin with him, Vatisa Eishes Adoinav. This, says the Midrash, go back to the first Possuk in Shishi, Perek Lamates Possuk Zayin. This is the deeper meaning of the words, Vayehi Achar Hadvorim Ho'ele, Vatisa Eishes Adoinav Zinei Yosef. It doesn't just mean these experiences. It means after these words, after the words, the wife of Potiphar raises her eyes to Yosef. Which words? The words that Yosef told his father about his brothers in Lashon Hara that he spoke. Because of, not just after those words, because of those words, Potiphar's wife raises her eyes to Yosef and tries to get him to sin. Okay. Let's take this idea one step deeper. The wife of Potiphar. What's motivating her? What's pushing her into all of this? Rashi says, in the first Possuk in Perek Lamates, Rashi says that the wife of Potiphar's intentions were l'shem shamayim. In fact, Rashi says that's the reason why the Torah sticks the story of Tamar into the middle of the whole story of Yosef and the brothers, to tell you that just like Tamar's intentions were l'shem shamayim, so to the wife of Potiphar's intentions were l'shem shamayim. Afsu l'shem shamayim. How can you say it was l'shem shamayim? Rashi says something wild. She saw, the wife of Potiphar sees astrologically that she's going to have children from Yosef. And Rashi concludes, she wasn't even wrong. It's just that it wasn't her, it was her daughter. Who's her daughter? Her daughter here is referring to the woman that actually marries Yosef. A woman the Torah will soon refer to as Osnas, Bas Potiphera, etc. She's the one who marries Yosef and is the mother of Menashe and Ephraim. So she sees astrologically that she's destined to have children from him. So she's doing this l'shem shamayim. She believes they're destined to be together. Not just in this world, in the next world too. Ba'olam hazeh and ba'olam haba. The wife of Potiphar is no simple woman. She's not just, the woman who walks around Macy's with her husband's credit card, buying different outfits, yeder tog and yeder nacht. Don't take this simply. Says Rashi in Chumash. She sees things. I have a proposal here. If the wife of Potiphar sees things, then maybe she knows more about Yosef than we give her credit. Maybe she knows that when the Torah says Vayhi achar advorim oele, that it was after these words, the words that Yosef spoke to his father, the slander, that which Yosef is being held accountable for here. Maybe she knows about that too. Maybe she knows that to some degree Yosef has sinned and is being punished in a way of midah keneged midah. Maybe she knows the story of the Dvorim. If she can see the future, maybe she can see the past. Now let's go back just for a minute to the Gemara that we started off with. Listen to this. The Gemara says, B'chol yoim v'yoim, when the Gemara says we tell the story of the wife of Potiphar to any Rasha who shows up in heaven and says, I couldn't learn Torah because I was too beautiful, we tell him the story of Yosef, and what do we say? Listen to the words now again. B'chol yoim v'yoim, every single day, Hoyo eishes Potiphar mishadaltoi bidvarim. B'chol yoim v'yoim, every single day, the wife of Potiphar was attempting to get Yosef to sin, and how was she doing it? Bidvarim, with words. Which words? Which words? The Gemara doesn't tell us which words. The Gemara goes on to talk about her shopping habits. She wore one outfit in the morning and one outfit in the evening. Okay, so which words? The words that she said, I'm going to squash you and I'm going to blind you, I'm going to lock you up in prison. Yosef doesn't seem to get affected by those words. And that isn't even what the Gemara goes on to say. So what's these dvarim here? B'chol yom v'yom, every day, she was attempting to get in with words. Which words? I have a daring proposal. Perhaps it was Yosef's own words that she was making him eat. Perhaps it was Yosef's own past that the wife of Potiphar is aware of, that she's harassing Yosef with. Perhaps she's looking, the wife of Potiphar is looking in the face and she's telling him, Du machzach nish kein tzaddik. Don't show up here and claim you're some great holy roller. I know exactly who you are. And I know exactly why you're here. And I know exactly how you ended up here. You slandered your brothers. You called them slaves. And that's why you ended up as a slave. You told your father they were eating Eiver min achai. And so they shechted a goat and dipped your shirt in blood and told your father you're dead. And you told your father that your brothers were giving eyes to non-Jewish women. And now it's my turn, says the wife of Potiphar, to carry out Hashem's repercussion for that. And I'm going to put my eyes on you. And don't you machzach as if you're immune. Take your medicine, said the wife of Potiphar to Yosef. You've earned this. You deserve it. The Rabbi Shalom works midah keneged midah. You want to be a tzaddik, but don't sin. You want to be the one who runs to your father with lashon hara about your brothers? You're no tzaddik. Who do you think you are, refusing me? You're no better than me. Excuse me. And with this, she sought to make her case that Yosef had no reason to withhold from her. What are you holding on to? Tzidkes? Du bist nicht kein tzaddik. Don't look at me, said the wife of Potiphar, as the source of all your problems, as the source of your evil. I'm not your Yetzer Hara. Don't shoot the messenger. The Yetzer Hara is within you. The Rasha is within you. You started this whole thing, and now you're going to finish it. The Rabbi Shalom is punishing you for the lashon hara that you spoke, and now you're going to have to suffer the consequences. Vatiso eshes Adonov eseneho el Yosef. Okay. Next point. Excuse me. The Gemara says that a Rasha shows up in heaven. And a Rasha says, you can't hold me responsible for not studying Torah. Why not? The Rasha says, no, hoyisi, I'm beautiful. V'torud beyitzri hoya, and I was busy with my Yetzer Hara. Now, what kind of an argument? What kind of an argument is that, right? Imagine imagine a policeman, right? Pulls somebody over for speeding, for going through a red light, I don't know what. Pulls the guy over and says, excuse me, sir, you went through a red light, you were speeding, you were texting, ich weiß was. And the person tells the policeman, listen, look how beautiful I am. Look how beautiful my car is. Do you see how beautiful this image is when the top of my convertible is down and I'm flying through these beach streets and I'm texting? You're going to tell me not to do this? I'm beautiful. Oh, the policeman should say, oh, I'm so sorry. You're beautiful. I didn't know. Your car is beautiful. In that case, speed gesundheit. It's a shtuyot. What kind of an argument is this? Why do we have to tell him a response? I might submit Yosef. What are you Yosef for? The guy shows up and said, I didn't study Torah because I was beautiful and I was busy with my Yetzer Hara. That's not what, not perhaps, there's definitely a deeper level here. Maybe this is what it means. A person shows up in heaven, as a soul comes upstairs after 120 years, and the person is a Rasha. And we say to him, what happened to you? You led a life full of potential. Why didn't you study Torah? And the person gives a response from the depths of his heart. Listen to me. He says, it's not my fault. Why not? Noe hoyisi, I was beautiful. The Torah beyitzri hoya, and my Yetzer Hara got the better of me. I'll tell you what it means. Noe hoyisi doesn't just mean that he was physically beautiful. It means he was spiritually beautiful. The person shows up after 120 to the heavenly Beis Din, and the heavenly Beis Din says, what happened to you? What did you study Torah for? And the person says, listen to me. Listen to me. You have to feel my pain for a minute. Noe hoyisi, I was beautiful. I had a beautiful soul. It was pure, it was sensitive, it was wholesome, it was perfect. Okay. What happens now? But a sensitive, beautiful, and perfect soul has one disadvantage. You know what it is? It's incredibly sensitive. But Torah beyitzri hoya, as soon as the Yetzer Hara attacked me, as soon as the Yetzer Hara made even the tiniest blemish in me, my beautiful, perfect, gorgeous soul felt blemished, felt less than. I felt defiled and I felt perverted. I couldn't find my footing afterwards. The Yetzer Hara really got to me. You see, the more beautiful a person is spiritually, the more they're capable of reaching spiritual heights, the worse it is when the Yetzer Hara actually does have an impact on them, even if it's a very small impact on them. Why is the Rabbi Shloim punishing Yosef so terribly for the Lashon Hara that he spoke? So he told his father some things about his brothers. All of a sudden his life turns into a living Gehenna. His brothers want to kill him and sell him, and he ends up as a slave and the wife of Potiphar. Why? He said something to his father, so what? Well, the answer is, he's Yosef. He's Yosef. For a regular person to say Lashon Hara is one thing, but for Yosef has the potential to be king. Yosef has potential to be the ruler of the world. Yosef has potential to teach everybody the difference between right and wrong. Yosef is supposed to be the leader of everything moral and ethic and right in the world. And Yosef is talking Lashon Hara. This is a travesty. Because he's so beautiful, physically and spiritually, even the tiniest infraction is devastating. So the Rasha comes up to Beis Din Shel Maila and says, you want to know why I didn't study Torah? I was discouraged. I lost hope. I lost my way. Why did I lose my way? Because I started off so beautifully. Expectations were so high of myself. The Torah beyitzri hoya, as soon as the Yetzer Hara got a footing, I felt like it's never going to be the same. You know those cynics who say the secret to happiness in life is low expectations? The secret to misery in life is high expectations? This is the argument. The argument is the person, and it's a very powerful argument, the person comes to Beis Din and says, the Yetzer Hara got the better of me before I knew what hit me. I was barely a teenager, 16, 17 years old. Boom, I spoke Lashon Hara, and before I knew it, my soul is blemished. I started off so beautiful. I felt like I can never make my way back. Noe hoyisi, v'torud beyitzri hoyisi. No, hoyisi, v'torud beyitzri. That means the blemish of the Yetzer Hara, the impact that the Yetzer Hara had on me, it hurt me so much. This is what he's telling the heavenly Beis Din. You want me to overcome the Yetzer Hara? You want me to be able to empower it? Don't make me so beautiful in the first place. An analogy that's brought for this is like this. If you take a table, a brand new table, right? And you walk over to it and you give it a clap and you chip the table. A brand new car, just drove it off the lot, right? It gets swiped, it gets scratched. A brand new suit gets nicked or something like that. How much does this brand new thing become devalued through a tiny nick, scratch, or imperfection? How significant is this damage on the object? What's the answer? The answer is, it depends how much it's worth. A regular, simple table, you give it a tiny little clap, big whoop. It started off being worth $100, now it's worth 95. A regular, cheap, bottom of the line car, you scratch it, big whoop. A regular suit, you pull a thread, big whoop. But take a table that's worth $35,000 and give it a chip, it can lose half its value just like that. Take a car of a couple of $100,000, give it a scratch, half its value gone. The more sensitive, the more the quality of something is, the more the tiniest infraction ruins it. So the person comes to the Beis Din Shalmaila and says, you want to know why I didn't study Torah? Because I was a Rasha. What kind of excuse is that? He's not saying, therefore, I'm not responsible. He's saying, therefore, I didn't stand a chance. He was too good before it started. No, you see, I was so beautiful, and you put me in a world full of filth and temptation. No, now what's supposed to happen now? What's supposed to happen now? You expected me to retain this type of perfection? Not possible. And once the Yetzer Hara made a scratch in me, half my value was gone because I started off so holy and so beautiful. I was discouraged. I felt like I felt like a disappointment. And I'll never, no matter what I'll accomplish after that, it'll never be the same. This is the argument that the person makes. So says the Beis Din Shalmaila, I have a story to tell you. It's about a man who was much more beautiful than you. Klum noah hayisa Yosef. Were you more beautiful than Yosef? Did you have more potential than Yosef? Was your soul more wholesome and more perfect than Yosef HaTzadik was? And yet the wife of Potiphar every single day rubbed his infractions in his face. Every single day she reminded him of what a failure he is. She would remind him of the things that he said to his father and all the repercussions that resulted as a result of that. To the point, yes, that Yosef lost his resolve. And even Yosef HaTzadik, the beautiful, the wholesome, the perfect, one day came home and said, I'm finished. There's no hope for me. She's right. I am responsible for my own undoing. I spoke Lashon Hara. The Rabban Shalom is punishing me for what I did, and there's no point in holding on. My potential is, that beautiful potential that I was born with is gone. And then what happened? Let's conclude the Dvar Torah. And then his father appeared to him in the window and said, Yosef, you're making a terrible mistake. If you can find within yourself the resolve and the strength to control yourself now, then your name still goes in the stones of the Kohen Gadol as he does his service in the Beis HaMikdash, in the holiest of places and the holiest of times and the holiest of people. Don't give up on yourself. Don't believe the woman who tells you that the Lashon Hara that you spoke is your destiny and is your end, and then you cannot emerge from this. No. If you believe her, yes, then you're finished. Then your name will be erased, and you will be called Yosef Roya Zionus, the company of harlots. But if you insist that I am a son of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and if you insist that my neshama is perfect, and if you insist that you can come back and find your way, then no matter what you've been through and no matter what you've done, even if it's your fault, you will be able to restore your beauty to its glory, original glory, and even much, much more. It's not despite Yosef's experiences with his father that we hold every Rasha responsible. It's specifically because of them. This is the message to every Rasha who shows up in heaven. The Gemara says, Yosef Machayev Esarashoyim. Every person who comes upstairs and says, you want me to serve Hashem, to study Torah? I'm a Rasha, meaning what? I started off great. I had great potential, but the potential was you set me up for failure, says every neshama to the heavenly Beis Din. You set me up for failure. You gave me a soul that's too sensitive. I remember reading, it was a beautiful letter that was written by the Lubavitcher Rabba. He was writing about individuals who struggle with different handicaps in life and different things like that. And the Rebbe writes, sometimes the souls of these individuals that come into this world are so sensitive, they're so lofty and pure, they're infinitely higher than yours and mine. And so they need this type of protection to protect them from the corruption of the world. So the Rabbi Shalom puts them in a position where they have these different types of handicaps, so they're not even faced with the free choice to be able to sin. They don't even maybe have that type of consciousness. Sin can't touch them. They can't choose to sin. They can't choose not to sin. They're immune to all of it because their souls wouldn't be able to handle such a thing. So the soul stands before the heavenly Beis Din and says, you're going to tell me that I didn't study Torah? I'll tell you why I didn't study Torah. Because I'm a Rasha. Meaning what? Meaning it was too beautiful. It started off too good. You should have sent me down, a regular car, a regular suit, a regular table, and then I wouldn't have cared if I got scratched or nicked or said, Abis Lashon Hara here, Abis Lashon Hara here. I would have studied Torah. It wouldn't have discouraged me. You made me too beautiful. And now Torah B'yitzri, now the Yitzhara got the best of me. Because now the Yitzhara looks at me and says, you're damaged goods. And the Yitzhara is right. I am damaged goods. How can you expect for me to serve Hashem if I'm damaged goods? So concludes the Gemara. We tell every single person that argues this, we tell him the story of Yosef. And we tell him that when Yosef was in his deepest and darkest hour, and when the wife of Potiphar looked at him and said, you're no tzaddik, you could have been. You're no angel, you're no perfect young man, you could have been, but you ruined it because of what you did, and it's your fault. This, ladies and gentlemen, this is the ultimate abuse. When the abuser tells the victim, it's not my fault that I'm abusing you, it's yours. And the victim, sooner or later, Rahman al-Islam, starts to believe it and says, yes, it is my fault. That's of course, it isn't really. But this is when the abuser really gets to the victim, gets to their heads. And Yosef loses his willingness or his ability or his resolve to fight. And his father appears to him in the window and says, Yosef, you're going to be written up in the same stones of the Kohen Gadol as your brothers. The same individuals you slandered and you spoke Lashon Hara against. Your place is together with them on the Kohen Gadol in the Beis HaMikdash. Unless you actually forfeit your rights to it by throwing it all away and believing this harassing woman that you're damaged goods. You're not damaged goods. But you have to discover that within yourself. And that perhaps is the message of the Beis Din Shel Maila to every one of us and to every person who comes upstairs and says, me, I can't. I had all these blockages, I had all these imperfections, I had all these experiences, I was hurt, I hurt myself, other people hurt me, I became resentful, sarcastic, cynical. To every one of these Jews, there's a Yaakov Avinu who comes to the Jew and says, your place is on the stones of the Kohen Gadol, together with every single Jew out there, together with all your brothers. The moment Yosef realizes, encapsulates that, embodies it, and through Yosef, Yosef Mechayev Asaroshoim, through Yosef, every other person in that position is empowered in this way. Like Yosef, who discovers his strength at this point, Yosef became the most powerful person in the world. So it is once a Yid discovers the power of his soul, this Yid also can once again become the most powerful person in the world. All right. I conclude by connecting it to Hanukkah, a word from the Kotzker Rebbe. You know the famous question, why do we celebrate Hanukkah for 8 days if it was only a 7-day miracle? After all, the miracle that the oil lasted for 8 days, not 7, was a 7-day miracle. One day was nature. The other 7 days were miraculous. Why is it an 8-day Yom Tov? The Kotzker Rebbe says, I'll tell you why. You know what the Gemara says? The Gemara says that when the Jews entered the Beis Hamikdash in the times of Hanukkah, after they were victorious at war, they discovered that that the Greeks had defiled kol hashmanim shebeheichel, had defiled all the oil in the Beis Hamikdash, everything. It was all impure. And then the Gemara says, Bodku, they searched. They only found 1 jug of pure oil with the seal of the Kohen Gadol. They lit it, and it lasted miraculously for 8 days. Frek the Kotzker Rebbe, the Gemara just told you that all the oil was defiled, everything. Timu kol hashmanim shebeheichel. What are you looking for? What are you looking for? All the oil in the Beis Hamikdash is defiled. Bodku, they searched, and they found 1 more jug of oil. If you believe that all the oil is defiled, why are you searching? Says the Kotzker Rebbe, that was the miracle. That's the Yom Tov. The Yom Tov is that even when they faced the reality in which they felt that every last drop of oil is defiled, they still searched. And when they searched, they found. And when they found, the miracle of Hanukkah happened. And so it is with every single person who stands before the heavenly Beis Din and says, me, you want something from me? All of my oil is impure. Everything is defiled. The heavenly Beis Din will say, surely you are no more beautiful than Yosef. Surely you didn't experience the midah keneged midah of the Rabbanu Shalom any more than Yosef did. And if Yosef, in the moment where everything seemed defiled, could find within himself the courage to search, to look for the goodness, to look for hope and light and glory, then so can you. And the miracle of Hanukkah emerges. Please God, may it be a Yom Tov of light and glory and beauty for us in Klal Yisrael. May the Yidden in Eretz Yisrael and in Israel be safe. May the Yidden all around the world be safe. And may the Rabbanu Shalom bless us all with a freilichen, lichtigen Chanukah.